Okay, hi, I'm Jeff. I'm the Divorce Dude, and today is my second video in a series I wanted to make just to help men that are going through the divorce process, because it's really hard and really confusing and really stressful, and there aren't very many resources out there for men. So the first thing I want to talk about is there are 4 issues that every divorce, well, almost every divorce is going to address, and it's just important to know what the issues are and to know kind of what the standard practices are, generally speaking, recognizing that every jurisdiction around the country is different. Unfair, but that's the way it is. The 4 issues in almost every divorce are the division of assets, what you have less what you owe, the parenting time with the children, alimony, which is now usually called maintenance, and child support. So those are the 4 central issues that you're probably going to have to negotiate with your soon-to-be ex. So as you prepare for your divorce, one of the things that you're going to need to do with your spouse, if she does the financials as well, is you're going to need to get a picture of what you have less what you owe. And so typically it'll be something like this. Your house that you have, if you have a rental house also or whatever, but your house that you have, what it's worth, and then what you owe on it. Your cars, what they're worth, and then what you owe, if anything, on them. What cash you might have in any bank accounts or any other IRAs or any other bank accounts that you might have. Anything that you have in a 401k or pension, any kind of retirement assets that you have, any credit card debt that you have, and then anything else that's of significance. And that's not the silverware and the plates. That's things like maybe guns in a gun safe or significant jewelry or anything that is worth quite a bit of money is fair game. And so typically what will happen when you do asset division is typically it's 50-50. Each partner typically gets 50% of the assets and 50% of the debt. So in this particular example, you can see it's a house worth $400,000. They owe $210,000 on the mortgage. They've got a car that's worth $10,000 that has no debt on it. Another car worth $20,000 and they owe $10,000 on it. $10,000 in the bank. 401k worth $50,000 and then $30,000 of credit card debt, and then about $10,000 worth of other stuff. So this particular couple has $500,000 worth of assets and they owe $250,000. Now what happens a lot in divorce is the house is the biggest asset that a couple owns. So typically they're kind of forced to sell that house to get the cash out of it and split that cash. Now what can happen is, like on this particular example, they owe $210,000, so that's $105,000 each of the mortgage. One person might be able to get together $105,000 from family or from someone and buy the other one out. So pay the other one $105,000, and then that person can stay in the marital home, which is really good for children to stay in the home if possible. But a lot of times you're going to have to sell that house, and you're going to need that cash to pay for lawyers and the divorce costs. So that's kind of the division of assets. Just be prepared that the default usually is 50-50. Now it can all be negotiated. So you can say, I'll tell you what, I'll keep the house and you can have all the 401k and all the bank account. Or, you can negotiate that stuff to whatever works out to about 50-50. But you may have to sell your house. Next issue is parenting time. And I'm happy to tell you this is something that men have made a lot of progress in the last decade or so. It used to be that women would always get almost all the parenting time and men would get every other weekend or things like that. And these days, where a lot of women have joined the workforce and people are realizing the equal value that men bring in children's lives, it's very common to get 50-50 parenting time. Unless there are extenuating circumstances like abuse or something like that, typically you're going to get 50% of the parenting time. And a lot of times the way that'll work is with young children. Young children need more frequent contact with each parent. So young children typically are every 2 to 3 days they want you to switch, going back and forth. And then with teenagers, they like less disruption in their life, and they're getting more independent. So with teenagers, it's usually every other week. You alternate weeks. So that's kind of the default with parenting time is 50-50. Okay, the third issue in divorce is alimony or maintenance. It's super unethical in most situations, but it is what it is, and you're going to have to face it probably. So the 3 things now each state is different. Some states have 4 cause, and they'll look for things like adultery or abuse or things like that, and they'll adjust any alimony accordingly. In a lot of states, and the growing momentum around the country is what they call a no-fault or no-cause divorce, where the court really doesn't care why you're getting divorced or what anybody has done. They just look at it like a mathematical formula, unfortunately, and that stinks if you're in the situation where your spouse is bailing and there's nothing you can do about it. They're going to look at it like a formula, and this is the way the formula is going to work in a no-fault state. The first question is, how long were you married? The next question is, how much is your gross income or your gross salary? And the next question is, how much is her gross income or her salary? And so I'll walk you through now kind of how that formula works, at least in the state of Colorado. Your state will definitely be different, and you'll want to consult an attorney for that. Okay, so let's take a hypothetical example. This is not my data, it's just a hypothetical. This particular couple has been married for 10 years. Now remember, in a lot of states, that years that you're married is not final and complete until your divorce is actually finished. So if your divorce takes a year to get done, that's going to add on to this calculus. But let's say this couple's been married for 10 years. So in the state of Colorado, they take half of that, and that's how long the major income earner is going to have to pay alimony by default. So half of 10 years would be 5 years of alimony. Okay, well, then how much is that person going to have to pay? Well, they would look at his gross income, and in this example, I'm just using round numbers. Let's say he makes $100,000. Well, they'll take 40% of that number, and that's his part, so $40,000, less her contribution. So they'll usually take the less earner, the lower earner. So let's say that she makes $70,000, and in Colorado, they take 50% of that. So that'd be $35,000 would be her part. So in the state of Colorado, you would take $40,000 of his part minus $35,000 for her part, and the major earner, which is the man in this case, would have to pay $5,000 a year for 5 years of alimony. So that's kind of probably a somewhat normal situation. Each state is different. Some states have a lot lower incomes, other states have way bigger incomes, but that's kind of the way that Colorado does it. All right, now I wanted to show you kind of a worst case situation, which can happen in longer marriages, especially if maybe she was a stay-at-home mother and that's what the two of you have agreed on. The court's going to view you like a criminal in that case, and you're going to pay through the nose. Even though you may have felt like you each contributed 50%, it was a 50-50 thing, she was taking care of the kids, and you were out earning an income, the court is going to view you like you basically enslaved her, you stuck her in a home, your career took off and grew while she was suffering. The court doesn't care about any sacrifice that you've made. The court only cares about her sacrifice, that she gave up a career. So that kind of a thing, let's say it's an 18-year marriage in this particular case. Again, this is not my data, it's just hypothetical. But let's say it's an 18-year marriage. Well, you take half of that. That's 9 years of alimony. That's a decade, basically, that person's going to have to pay. And let's say that he had a really good career and he was making a $150,000 gross salary. So 40% of that is $60,000. Now let's say that she was a stay-at-home mom and she didn't have an income. Well, the court is going to view it that any knucklehead can at least get a minimum wage job, and a minimum wage job would be $20,000 a year. So they call it imputing. So the court will impute $20,000 of gross income onto her, because anybody could make that, and it'll take half of that, so that's $10,000. So his part was $60,000. And her part was $10,000. So his part minus her part is a $50,000 difference. So in this particular case, this guy who thought he was chivalrous, he thought he was providing for a family and things like that and doing well, guess what? She just won the lottery. This particular woman, she's going to get $50,000 of annual income for 9 years off of him without lifting a finger. She doesn't even have to get a job if she doesn't need to. She's just going to coast off of him for 9 years. Now, there are a ton of variables that can modify that, and I'll get into those in a subsequent video, but this is just the default. Okay, the last issue that can affect some divorces is child support, and that is going to be influenced by your parenting time. So if it's 50-50, it'll go one way. If it goes 70-30 or something like that, then the person only with the kids 30% of the time is going to pay more money in child support. But generally, in your state is going to be different. Each jurisdiction is very different. So I don't want to give too much guidance on this. Talk to a lawyer, get some guidance. A lot of states have a formula. It's just a math calculation. But generally, you're going to pay $400 to $600 a month per child per month. And that's just brutal, but it is what it is. So somewhere between $4,000 to $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a year per kid. And that depends on the state, how long you have to pay it. Can be up until they're 18. In Colorado, it's until they turn 19. And again, there's a lot of different factors that can influence that, parenting time, incomes, all that stuff. But that's kind of sort of what you might expect to pay. Just to summarize really quickly, there generally are 4 issues that each divorce is going to consider if you have children. It's going to be the division of assets. Every divorce will deal with that. Parenting time, obviously only if you have kids. Alimony or maintenance, and child support. Good luck. The last thing I'll say is, boy, if you can work something out that you both feel is fair and equitable, that is so preferable. The courts are really going to just hammer the man in court unfairly and unethically, but that's the way it's going to go. So if you can work something out with your soon-to-be ex, do it. Get something that's fair. Get something that works for both of you. If you can't, you're going to fight, and these are the 4 things that you'll fight about.